Good evening, everyone. I'm Darian Pollard, and I'm the proud president of Montgomery College. Greetings to you here in the room and those of you who are watching us on television or on social media. I'm delighted tonight to welcome you to tonight's Presidential Dialogue Series and a conversation with the very popular radio host, WAMU's Joshua Johnson. Thank you again to our media sponsor, Bethesda Magazine, and its editor, Steve Hull, who has been a wonderful supporter of this program. Unfortunately, he is very sad not to be here this evening, but we always appreciate his partnership and the warm regards he sends to each of you here this evening. Now, before I introduce Mr. Johnson, to whom I know he is not, he seems familiar to many of us, just even today as I listened to him on the station, I'd like to take a moment to mention to you why we talk about the relationship of media and American identity. If you've been with us for other parts of this series, we've had some rich conversations and dialogue about higher education and poverty, business and ethics, and incarceration and race. Each of these topics has an important root in our notions of American identity and democracy. But perhaps most fundamental to this is our ability to even discuss these issues is the work that the media does to create spaces for these types of conversations. Press freedom is tradition in this country that is highly valued in our nation, holding powerful actors accountable for their actions and thus so hopefully strengthening our democracy. The American press has always long prided itself on its access to powerful public figures and its right to question them on behalf of the American public. Journalism is rightfully credited with creating a transparency in government upon which our nation prides itself upon. Journalists don't have to reveal their sources except under extraordinary circumstances, and tools such as the Freedom of Information Action empowers journalists to play their important roles as watchdogs over our government and other parts of our society. The media make government accessible and accountable to the people whom it serves. Forums like WAMU's programming also create vital spaces for the workings of democracy. Elected officials often are beholden to party-approved rhetoric on public statements, but when they come to a radio station, they have to engage people, and they have to sometimes engage their adversaries as people. The civility that is absent from so much public discourse right now that has popularized posturing around ideas has to be left at the door when you step into spaces such as Josh Johnson's space. The conversations that perhaps should be happening on the floors of the House and Senate take place within the walls of a radio booth. Not only do listeners get to hear these dialogues, they get to participate in them, which is really the essence of democracy. So I want to applaud WAMU and NPR, which syndicates its work. And I want to thank you all for choosing to be here tonight to participate in this conversation. And I want to introduce to you the voice and vision behind this important work. Now, as many of you already know, Joshua Johnson took over from Diane Rehm a little bit over a year ago, although it seems a bit longer. When he first relocated to this area, I had the opportunity to go to a house party to be introduced to him. And I was quite captivated, not only by his wit and his honesty and his reflection, but the opportunity that he took in that space to talk about the powerful role that media and newsmakers have in making sure that the public is aware of the issues that are there. You should know that he began his career working as an anchor and reporter in his native South Florida. There he helped to launch an innovative partnership between WLRN Public Radio and the Miami Herald. He then worked for 5 years as a morning newscaster for KQED in San Francisco and was the creator and host of the provocative nationwide public radio series, Truth Be Told, which explored race in America. He is now the host of the very popular 1A, which is produced by NPR member station WAMU and is distributed nationally by National Public Radio. Mr. Johnson works across media platforms, teaching podcasting at the University of California at Berkeley School of Journalism, and is an active member of the National Association of Black Journalists. Mr. Johnson, I thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm going to join him, and maybe you can join me in giving him a warm welcome to Montgomery College.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
So I'll start off by giving you an opportunity to offer any omissions, corrections, fun facts that I did not offer in that introduction, because I am just delighted to have you here today at our Germantown campus.
Well, far be it for me to correct the president in our presence. I'm thinking about my longevity, frankly. No, the only thing I would say is that I used to teach journalism at UC Berkeley's Graduate School of Journalism. I had to stop that to come do 1A. So as I got the job, as we were ramping up for like final projects, so I was flying back and forth between DC doing interviews and then back to Cal doing classes, and then I had to grade final projects, and then I had to move my stuff. It was bizarre. But now my students are publishing. One of them has their own podcast that's beginning, I believe, to draw some revenue. One of them had a piece on the Marketplace Morning Report just yesterday from El Salvador. Yes. Another one got published in The Atlantic this month. So, you know, we do it big at Cal. Wow. But I'm very proud of my students.
We're so happy to have you in the Washington, D.C. area. And as I shared with the group a little while ago, when I first had the opportunity to meet you, I was just captivated. And I came back probably the next day and told Dr. Gibbons, who coordinates this series for me, I know who I want to have next year, and work so hard. And thank you to you and your team for making yourself available to us. So the way this works, I have a series of questions that I'll be posing to Mr. Johnson, and I have to tell you, I have a plethora of them. I have no problem coming up with questions. However, I'm going to give you an opportunity to get in probably about 7:45, 7:50, and then if your questions don't come bountifully, I will go back to my questions. We have 2 microphones that are here. When we get to that point, I'm going to invite you to go to the microphones and pose your question succinctly, and then be prepared to step away, and we can have him respond to as many questions that comes from the audience. So I got to ask you about your show. But I think as I listened to you today, and I thought about this idea that it's called 1A. And I know that means something to you, very significant. I've heard you talk a little bit about that. So can you tell us why you named your show 1A and why this is a great story?
Sure. The name has 2 meanings. 1A stands for the First Amendment, which we would consider kind of the basic rules of the road for how we interact with one another in a democracy. The 5 freedoms that are baked into the First Amendment basically kind of lay out how we deal with one another. You know, freedom of speech, press, petition, assembly, freedom of worship, kind of the basics of American self-expression. So it seemed like an appropriate name. And then it also comes from my time at the Herald. The Miami Herald calls its front page Page 1A. And those are the kinds of stories I always wanted us to focus on, the kind of stories that are above the fold of the front page, that are the ones that everyone's talking about and would like to talk about more deeply, and then the ones that are below the fold of the front page, which aren't necessarily the big breaking story, but they're illuminating, and they say something kind of about who we are right now and what's on our minds, and they paint a clearer picture of who we are to ourselves. So it's the dual meaning. One is this pillar of our democracy, the First Amendment, and we also talk a lot about First Amendment issues on the show. Yes. And then also just about our ethos, to talk about stories that are both big but also illuminating, that say something about who we are.
So one of the things I think is really important in this is that you have lifted up, I think, this idea of the First Amendment, which I know is clearly, as you described, critically important. I would imagine in this time, probably, and maybe other people will feel in other moments has been particularly relevant, but I think the idea of the First Amendment becomes critically important in this time we're trying to do so much new sense-making in our society right now. I'm interested to hear from you. Have you seen press freedoms being limited in any new ways in this past year, or maybe the last couple of years? And how have you used your show to push back where possible?
Well, thankfully, we haven't had to do much pushing back because we haven't felt many of the restrictions. We're pretty well free to kind of do what we need to do. I think that the press freedom is is as robust as it's been, but in the rise of digital media and social media, we're figuring out how to deal with the press in a different way. I mean, it's interesting that, you know, during the Obama administration, President Obama was one of the first presidents to really rock social media. But that also meant that the administration exerted more message control. And a lot of White House correspondents will tell you how hard it was to cover the Obama administration because he knew what his message was and he wanted to be the one to lead that message. So in some respects, filing Freedom of Information Act requests or getting answers at press briefings or doing all kinds of investigation was really, really hard. I think now the challenges to the press are largely because anyone can be press. You know, it's like being a parent and you finally give the keys to the car to your child for the first time and say, "Oh, okay, I love you, good luck, I taught you well. Please don't hit anybody.
Come back.
Come back." As they're going, "Yeah, I know." They take off. Everyone's in a Ferrari now. Like everybody, because everybody can publish. Everybody can create a podcast that is competitive with 1A. Just by dint of the fact that you can publish. It may not be as polished, the quality of it is up to you, but everybody can publish. Everybody can web stream. What people are watching right now, I could with, I have just as much publishing power as the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people in this room who are working crew. If I'm in the right place at the right time, I can just go, and all of a sudden I have the world's attention. And I think when you have that kind of Promethean fire in your hands, you gotta learn how to use it without burning yourself or burning a house down. And that's what the press is dealing with. It's not that the freedom is being restricted, but now everyone has this freedom.
Same freedom.
And what do you do with it? Like, are you a good steward of this freedom? We always had freedom of the press. We just didn't always have the tools to use it so powerfully so that anybody can be, you know, can publish great videos or music that is the same quality as what the networks come up with. Figuring out how to make sense of what's real and what's not, and what links to click on Facebook that won't make you look gullible to your friends, and figuring out, you know, which news sources to believe. That's the hard part. I'm much less worried about like actual legal restrictions on the press because the hue and cry of that would just be gigantic.
So it seems to me though, then there's some confusion about how one defines media, how one defines press, because oftentimes now I think there's a confusion between promotional types of interest, opinion pieces versus factual, substantive pieces that are helping you to be informed about things. Am I being too naive in that type of description?
No, but I think rather than confusion, I think there's opportunity for more education. The idea that journalists are supposed to be neutral arbiters of the truth, historically speaking, is recent. The idea that newspapers, and we'll just deal with newspapers before the advent of digital media, that newspapers were supposed to just call it down the line, that's really, really recent historically. All newspapers were presumed to have a bias since Gutenberg, basically. I mean, the case that kind of put, you know, seditious libel on the radar, the John Peter Zenger case, had to do with a newspaper called the New York Journal, which was founded just to criticize one politician, whose name, I swear to God, was William Cosby. I am not making that up. This guy, he was like a governor in New York, not like the governor of the state, but when New York was still a colony, he was a governor. He was some big, powerful guy, and he ticked off the wrong person, and this person was like, I'm gonna start a newspaper just to piss you off. And he founds the New York Journal, and the New York Weekly Journal, and the whole job of the paper was just to criticize him. And people got it, because you know where they're coming from. This is the liberal paper, this is the conservative paper, this is the union paper, this is the socialist paper, you know, this is the segregationist paper, this is the abolitionist paper. People knew that. And I think part of what feels like, oh my God, I can't trust the news anymore, requires a little bit of a lens of saying, hey, you have to be a smart consumer. Like, we've handed you the keys. I can't sit in the passenger seat with you anymore.
Can't be passive consumers.
Right, I can teach you what signs to look out for, but I can't give you permission to sleep on your responsibility to be smart about what you put in your brain. we've gotten to the point where we understand that there's a label on the side of a box of a product in the store, and you can read the label, and if you're wondering, why does this always make me feel like I'm putting on weight? Well, the first ingredient in it is sugar. So maybe you should learn that the ingredients on the side of the box are listed in order of their volume.
Right.
Like, we get that. We get that you're supposed to test drive. You're supposed to try it before you buy it. And so part of what needs to happen is just educating people about the way the media work, so that when you see something that galls you, you won't feel like, how could this possibly happen? You'll understand how it happens. And if it doesn't work for you, you can leave it out. Or you can consume it, but keep it in context. My grandmother used to always say, consider the source, right? So if I can consider the source of where this information is coming from, I don't have to be upset that it's saying something that bothers me if I understand the point of view. And I can just use that contextually and say, okay, folks who view life this way, who view the country this way, interpret this story in this way. So I'm getting two valuable things. I'm getting the information, and I'm getting a lens on that perspective on this information. It doesn't have to make you feel like things are going crazy. It can make you feel more powerful. It can give you more control over how you navigate news and information.
So it calls us to be a more sophisticated consumer.
Yeah, or in some cases to learn for the first time, which I think is also unsettling. You know, it used to be there was 3 networks. You either turned to Peter Jennings or Dan Rather or Tom Brokaw.
Yeah.
And that was it.
That's it.
You turn on the NBC Nightly News and you find out what happened in Kosovo today. And you were thoroughly educated. And when you're young today, you go to Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat, like you have all these other sources, but you don't walk into like a channel. You walk into an ecosystem. I mean, you walk into this river of information. The problem is when we dip into that river, we don't remember a drop. All we recall is getting wet. And we have to come out of that river of information with something substantive.
That was
we have to
good.
come out, you can't spend all day in a river of information and come out wet and thirsty. How stupid is that? You have to be able to go in, and instead of just like immersing, you have to go fishing. You don't go in for the river. You go in for the fish. You go in for that. I say, I need that. That's a rock. That's coral. That's a shark. No. That. And then you go for what you need, and you learn how to assess. And I don't blame people for looking at it and going, I have no idea what I'm doing, because it's new. I mean, this is brand new. So we have to do a better job as educators, as journalists, as members of society of understanding this river of information that we're constantly in. And in those moments where we just come away wet and thirsty, back up and go, this was not a good use of my time. Next time I'm gonna do this different.
You know, it's interesting, it's changing for us, I know in academia, the whole nature of work in a lot of ways, about who has information, what our responsibilities are in disseminating that information, how you help students curate that information and make sense of it. And the first 3 articles you come to in a Google search may not be the first 3 you should have. How do you begin to navigate that and I think for a lot of us, it's happening so rapidly that we aren't able to really, we're having cognitive dissonance, really trying to figure out how you make sense of it all. And that to me, I think is where this fear and suspicion and anxiety starts to breed, because at this point, we simply as humans are and I don't want to say incapable, but we're highly frustrated in that change mechanism.
Well, and I don't think educators want to teach young people the wrong thing, especially when some educators look at the students in their classroom and they're like, I don't know why I'm teaching you. You should be teaching me. I have no idea. I'm just reading off a lesson plan. But that's a legitimate concern. Like there are plenty of teachers, K-12 and higher ed, who really are just following a lesson plan. And they are the ones who need media literacy first, not only so they can impart it to their students, but also so they can teach their students to today's standards. I mean, it's the same skill set, if it gives you any comfort, the same skill set that educators are looking for with their students is the same skill set we need our listeners and readers and viewers to have when we purvey information to you. It's the same. It's knowing how to tell what's real, what's not real, what's reliable, what's questionable, what may be reliable but is just outside your knowledge base. All of that is necessary to the work that we do. And if educators can find a way to make that intelligible to students, then it becomes easier, it really frankly becomes easier for people like us to do great work, because more people will understand, oh, that's reliable. Oh, this comes from somewhere that is trusted and respected and known and accountable for its errors. One of the things I would strongly suggest is, if you don't know where information is coming from, if they printed a nasty article about your mama, who would you sue? Do you know who to sue? If NPR.org printed a nasty article about your mama, you have options, right? You can go to NPR at 1111 North Capitol Street Northeast. You can get on NPR.org. You can find your member station. You could contact WAMU. Like, you would know whose phone to call and who to cuss out. But if NPR.co.net.Russia printed something, printed something about your mama, who do you sue? Right? If you cannot create a trail of accountability for something, maybe you shouldn't read it, right? Maybe it shouldn't go into your head. Maybe it shouldn't be part of your mental and intellectual diet. Because if you don't know who's accountable for it, what if you are feeding yourself something dangerous or poisonous? Who's accountable? Little things like that. I think if people take a second, especially those links on Facebook with the scary titles, what you don't know about your government could shock you. Before you click it, who would you sue if the article's wrong? If you share this and your friend goes on Snopes and goes, how stupid are you going to feel when you realize how gullible you were for sharing something that dumb? I think we need to be tougher on ourselves and say, this reflects on me. This affects me. I'm not going to click this. Because the minute you click it, they can tell you clicked.
Yes.
They don't need you to read the article. They need you to click the link. The instant you click the link to a BS article, they have made money. It's not about driving awareness. NPR's mission is about informing and illuminating. Their mission is about getting you to act. It's all about the click. We're a little bit more about the relationship. So you have to decide who you'd rather hang out with.
Trail of accountability. That's going to be my takeaway.
Right.
One of them from today as well.
Right. I want that as a bumper sticker. Who you gonna sue?
Who you gonna sue? ...
Right.
Trail of accountability.
Thank you very much.
See, we on that for you. We got
And then
that.
the next bumper sticker, not NPR.
Yes.
Please.
So one of the things I've been focusing on a lot over the last couple of years here at the college has been this notion that I call radical inclusion. Making sure that we take the opportunity intentionally as a college of lifting up everyone's experience to the extent that we can, and crafting an organization where those experiences can find home, where they can be valued, where at the end of the day they can feel nurtured and safe in an educational space. Your show, I think, strikes me as one that tries to carve out this dynamic in the media, and you do it exceptionally well through the various guests that you have on, the way it's organized, the way you engage your listeners, whether it be, and sometimes I'm listening to on the weekend, they'll and I'm thinking, oh, let me call in and say something about that. Then I'm like, oh, I can't do that. But there's a engagement that I see you do that's very, I think, reflective of where media is right now. What challenges have you encountered in creating this space for your show in this first year? In the Washington, D.C. area? Well,
there have been a few. First of all, I would say you are always welcome. We don't always have the phones live, but even when the phones are turned to voicemail, we go through our inbox. And you don't have to leave a voicemail on like the topic we're asking for. You can leave a voicemail on anything, on any topic you think is worth discussing, any feedback you have. We really do go through those through our inbox regularly. So anytime, 855-236-1818, and leave us a voicemail and give us your feedback or story ideas, show ideas. We love them. So please, always feel free to comment. In terms of creating kind of a radically inclusive space, it was, well, for one thing, the easy part was that it was part of our mandate
Sure.
from WAMU. Like, we knew that we wanted to have a program that could deal with all the myriad issues that America was going to be dealing with after the election. I knew that no matter who won the election, America was going to really want to talk, because either we were going to have Donald Trump as the president or our first female head of state. So either way, the whole nation was going to be like, huh? And we were all going to want to talk, regardless of how the election went. And I think coming into the job, and I found out I got the job before the election, but the announcement was after. So I had already kind of braced myself for, well, whatever's finna be, it's gonna be, and we're gonna have to talk. And I just, that part was kind of easy. I think the hardest part has been just kind of allowing people, has been demonstrating what that looks like so that people know how to reflect it back. Part of what we try to do on 1A is to model the kinds of conversations we wish more people were having. Because we know some of the topics that we talk about are things that you would like to talk about, but you don't have anyone to talk about it with. Like, one of the big phenomena that happened after the 2016 election, and this still breaks my heart, is that people said they couldn't go home for Thanksgiving. They skipped Thanksgiving.
With their family.
With their families. And then they skipped Christmas because of the election. So we know that part of our function is to provide a space for communication with people who have no one else to communicate with. Beyond that, part of the challenge is I would love to talk about you. I don't really need to talk to you because I don't like you. I'm mad at you. So if you could just be in the corner while I talk about you and then don't say nothing back, I would really very much appreciate it. And people have lately begun asking me very often, like, how do you have conversations with those people and stay objective and stay impartial? So I think part of the key to this idea of radical inclusion has been, for me, thinking through what I'm actually doing, because I'm not perfectly objective. I'm not perfectly impartial. No one is. I have come to think of my approach not as being impartial or objective, but as being clinical.
Yes.
I have a clinical approach to journalism. And what I mean by that is I used to work in research labs. I was in a summer program at Temple University in Philly at their medical school for students of color who were interested in medical careers, because I was on track to be a doctor before I came to my senses and settled down into something steady like journalism. Never said I was that bright. That's probably why I'm not a doctor today. And I remember working in labs with clinicians who were working on various cancers and HIV and all kind of dread diseases, some of whom had lost loved ones to these diseases. But when they got to the lab, they were like, hey, how's it going? They talked about what was going on, complained about that staff meeting they have at 1 o'clock. And they dropped their bags and they washed their hands and they started doing their work. They didn't go into the lab like, I am here to cure disease. And I have lived through the advent of this scourge coming and taking away the people that I love. And as long as God gives me breath, I shall use every breath in my body and every fiber of my being to fight this disease. And nothing shall stop me from my quest. No. We probably would have gassed him and dragged him out the loading dock. Like, that would not have gone well. They just sat down, washed their hands, and got to work. Doesn't mean they didn't care about finding cures, but they had to focus. Because if you can't focus, you can't function. If you can't focus, you can't function. And I find that often people get so upset about the issues that are important to them that they make zero headway because they're so mad they can't focus. So what I've learned to do is to be clinical. And the studio is my lab. Now, I have biases, I have opinions, I have perspectives, I have stereotypes, I have my politics. My job is to wash my hands of those as best I can. They'll never be 100% clean, because you never are. But to clean up as best I can, go in my lab, do my work, and when I walk out, all those things will jump right back on me, as is their nature. But I can't bring it in the lab because I will contaminate my sample. And if I contaminate my sample through my own negligence, it's my fault that my findings are useless. I can't be objective about racism, but I can be clinical in a conversation with someone who, for example, venerates statues of Robert E. Lee and say, tell me what it means to you that these statues are coming down. When you see one of these statues come down, what goes through your head? What goes through your heart in that moment? I can't be impartial about sexism. I am furious that there are men out there who think it's okay to treat a woman like a piece of meat. I'm not impartial about that. But I can be clinical in conversation with a man who is rethinking his relationships with women and say, take me to the moment where you are interacting with a female coworker. What is it exactly that you find yourself having a hard time doing or not doing? And how do you suss that out? And then when I walk out, I can think about him whatever I want to think. But in that moment, I have other work to do. I'm doing basic laboratory research about the nation and the world. And so I have to be able to just say, this isn't about me. None of this is about me. This is about you. You're the one who's agreed to sit in this lovely little national petri dish. And so my responsibility is to treat your willingness to be my sample with care and with professionalism. Scrub my hands of all my prejudices and biases and stereotypes and politics as best I can, and treat your willingness to be dissected with respect. And the minute I settle into that, inclusion becomes instantaneous because it's not about you. It's about the work you're here to do. You don't have to like the person you're including. You just have to learn from them and learn everything. And you can't learn everything unless you're willing to wash your hands for a minute and just say, I'm going to treat you as you are. I'm going to accept you as you are. And whatever you bring to the table, I want to learn everything I can, because I can't cure what I don't understand. I can't fight racism if I don't do that interview with that guy who's a son of a Confederate veteran. I can't fight sexism unless I do that conversation with the guy who says that he just doesn't understand the Me Too movement. It's vital, especially if you believe these things are social ills, but regardless of whether you do, how are we supposed to make sense of the things that matter to us as a democracy if we don't understand the issues? And if we don't understand the people who feel strongly about them? It's critical, it's vital, not just for journalism, but for democracy. Every now and then we just gotta wash our hands and go in. That's the first step, I think, to radical inclusion, is to let it not be about you.
Your response moved me for several reasons. One is that I think that one critique I often offer in our society, even within our college, I'll say that sometimes we've forgotten how to have conversations about things that we disagree about without being disagreeable. That we are much more in tune to the people who think like us, but not the people who don't think like us. And instead, we otherize them, and we say, and we have these false bifurcations all the time. Management and non-management, administration and this discipline and that. And there's just all these false ways we divide ourselves. One of the things you said a moment ago is that your hope is to model in your show how people at home can have these types of conversations. And I'm very curious. So I started this thing this year in my home. I've been having dinner parties about every 2 months or so, and table of 8. And the first time I did it, I messed up because I invited everybody who thought just like me. But I wanted to have this conversation about what was happening in our community around a particular issue. The second time I brought people together, I thought I could do like 4 and 4. To the extent I could figure out where they may be on different political spectrums. The third time I did it, I think we got a better mix, and I'm getting better at that. But it suggests a level of vulnerability, a conscious listening. How do you want your listeners, and how, you talked quite a bit right here about how to do this work personally, but how do we engage in some of this work within our community of really creating these spaces for the types of conversations that you're talking about, that casting away of our own privilege to privilege our opinions, but to create space for other conversations? I'm struggling with that.
That's a tough one. I mean, for me, it was easier because I was stepping into a legacy space that already had a trusted audience that was basically kind of like, okay, who is this fool? And I just had to kind of prove that I wasn't going to burn the building down. That's the main thing I had to do.
I think you're doing okay.
I'm doing all right.
You're doing
You know, the smoke alarm ain't gone off
Yeah.
in many a moon, but the year is young. So that was kind of my gift, is I got to just walk in and convince people that we were building on the legacy of the Diane Rehm show and not building over the legacy of the Diane Rehm show. Once that happened, and we kind of articulated the mission of the show and people could feel that the energy was unique and that we were doing things in a different way, then the show took off. As far as other people building similar conversations, I think the first question you got to ask is whether you're ready. Like, some people aren't ready to talk. They won't talk to you. And one of the things that we know is that we can only go where we're invited. Like, we can't push our way in someplace. If you don't want us, hey, all right, man, if you're ready, we will be here. But, you know, if we call a guest and the guest says, no, I don't want to be on 1A, we're not going to call over and over. Like, okay, that's fine. Can you recommend somebody who might be able to talk? No, click.
Okay.
Right. So the first thing that I think is we have to be clear as to whether people are ready to talk at all. Some people are too mad to talk. Some people don't really need dialogue. They just need to vent.
Yes.
Like, they need someone whose job it is, and this is why my job is often easier.
Yeah.
They just need someone whose job it is to sit there and listen. It's like, you know, hey, honey, how's it going? I'm home. You know, what's going on? You want to know what happened in this house tonight? No, but all right, go ahead. Well, first it was, and so all you have to do is endure the high-pitched squealing and the pain and the gnashing of teeth for a few minutes, and then you will have your house back. But if you interrupt and say, well, why didn't you just, man, listen, we're going to have to start all over. Just listen. All I need is somebody to listen to me for a minute. And then once you do that, that's me after a hard day, by the way. I don't know if you got it. I'm a sensitive soul. And then once you hear me, then I can hear you. Some people are too hurt to listen. And part of my job is to not judge them for their emotions. We had a guy on, we did the show in Ann Arbor, Michigan recently, at the University of Michigan. And we did a show about police reform in Baltimore. We had a guy on who's a former service member. He served in, I can't remember if it was Iraq or Afghanistan, but he went from the military to the Baltimore PD, served for some years, left there, and is now very strongly anti-Baltimore PD. He has advocated basically a wholesale, rebuilding, even if it means dissolving BPD and starting over. And so my first question is usually something narrative, like, Officer Jones, I can't recall his name, apologies for that, but, tell us about your time at Baltimore PD. Well, listen, I just want to say that the police departments are thoroughly corrupt and they're building on a legacy of racism that criminalizes black men and black bodies, and it's time that and he immediately went on his soapbox. And he's a remote guest, so I can't see him and be like, so I had to kind of do the deft interruption as quickly as I could. We go through the interview, and again, I ask him a very simple question. Tell us a little something about what you've seen that works, or before that. When you were an officer at Baltimore PD, talk about the culture there. Was everybody you encountered, kind of hewing this line about very heavy-handed enforcement? Were there any people that you encountered who viewed things the way you did? Man, it was so hard being in Baltimore PD, and that's why I believe that the criminalization of black bodies has got to stop, and we need to make it clear to these communities that the time, and he just kept going. And as I was just about to interrupt him, I heard his voice waver just a little bit. It was so subtle, I almost missed it. And in that moment, I was like, oh. And I said, I hate to ask you this, but from what you just said, and I know you're really, really angry, I have to say, and if I've got you wrong, please say so, but you sound to me like your work for the Baltimore Police Department has left you traumatized. Are you traumatized by the work you did there? have you let that go? And he said, I put people behind bars who were better people than me. And in that moment, all the angry tweets from listeners saying, this guy is just a crank, I support law enforcement in the thin blue line, stopped. Because he wasn't there to dialogue. He was in pain. And he needed to release that pain. It's like lancing a boil so it can heal. It's nasty and it stinks and it's filthy and ugh, and you don't want to handle it, you don't want to touch it. But if someone's brave enough to just go, it'll heal. And I think before we talk about dialogue, the first step is to determine whether people need to talk or whether they need to be heard. Because when everyone feels that they've been heard, everyone's ready to talk, right? You heard me, so I'm out of stuff to say. Go. Phyllis, I ain't got nothing else, and the room is quiet, and the quiet makes me uncomfortable. Say something. But if you have something on your heart that needs to get out, there's no way you can dialogue. I've had it happen more than once on 1A and other shows that I've hosted where clearly someone was just like on and they were rolling and I had to decide which questions that was in my stack that I'm not going to ask because I would like to ask other things, but this is necessary. Like, okay, you go. And I will find an elegant place to get in there. Before people are ready to talk, they need to know that they've been heard. So for communities that are struggling with this, it may not be the right time for dialogue. It might be the right time for just like a listening session. You know, whoever wants to take the mic, who's got something to say, maybe we limit it to 4 minutes or 5 minutes. If you have documents you want to put on the record, we'll gladly put it up and we'll post it in such and such a place, maybe in a Facebook group. But this is not for the council to solve this problem. This is for us to make sure we have all the evidence from you, and then the next step will be ideas. Maybe that's the way to go.
So one of the things, though, that I'm hearing in this is you also have to have an ability to listen.
Yeah.
And I was struck, thoughtful reflection on that story, but what struck me the most is that moment you had to be attuned to when his voice quivered.
I almost missed it.
Right,
It was
right.
so quick.
But you didn't. But you didn't, right? So how do we learn? What are your techniques? Maybe I should unpack this for me.
You listen to my show, don't you?
I do. That's my favorite line.
That's one of the words like unpack,
yeah.
navigate. That's another one I use all the time.
There's
How
a
do
few
we navigate
people
it?
in this room would tell you I use that quite frequently.
Well, that's a good one. That's a good one.
So what are the techniques you deploy to be a good listener? Because I think that is oftentimes one of the greatest lost opportunities in these moments is to actually listen. What do you do?
One of my favorite quotes about listening is from Annie Leibovitz, the famous photographer, who said the opposite of talking is not listening. For many people, the opposite of talking is waiting.
Right.
Like you got that thing, like someone says something, and your brain goes, oh, I got something to say. Okay, tell me when okay, when is he gonna say it? I'm waiting for him to take a breath. When is he gonna take a breath? As soon as he takes a breath, I'm gonna throw it in. He's taking a breath, he's about to take a breath. Now! And you just can't wait to jump in and interrupt. Learning to listen to that voice in your head that is speaking to you, it's called sub-vocalization. You ever read a book and you hear yourself reading the book in your head, like verbally out loud in your brain? It's called sub-vocalization. It's one of the ways you learn how to speed read is by teaching your brain to stop reading along out loud with you. When you hear yourself sub-vocalizing, you might not be listening. You're probably just waiting for the moment to strike so you can drive the conversation where it really needs to go. Shut him or her or them, because I don't know how many voices you got in your head these days. Tell all of them to shut up so you can just hear. One of the other techniques I learned, and this, depending on the circumstance, it may not be appropriate, but it's called recreation. It's a really perfect way to make someone know that you've heard them. It's almost so simple, it's kind of stupid. You know, someone comes into your office and says, so what happened today? Like you friggin' lost it. Like, what's going on? Well, I don't appreciate that you undervalue and disrespect me every chance you get. You always undercut me, and I'm sick of it. Okay, so I get it. You're upset that I undervalue you, I disrespect you every chance I get, and you feel like I undercut you, and clearly you're sick of it. Well, yes. I got it. Got it. Message received. Someone says it, you say it right back. I get it. You're saying XYZ. Yes, XYZ. Got it. Mm-hmm. And then stop. And let them drive. Sometimes the key is just testing your own brain and making sure you actually heard what you think you heard. Because if you're wrong, you will get real-time feedback. Mm-hmm. But then you get another chance to go, oh, I'm sorry, I got it. I'm sorry. No, you're right. I'm sorry, I was wrong. What you actually said was, and then you can build trust. Mm-hmm. So part of it is forcing your brain to be quiet, and part of it is training yourself to hear what people actually say, and not to repeat your interpretation to them, but to repeat the information, not the interpretation. Mm-hmm. You don't have permission to interpret me if you ain't listening to me. Why do I care what you think if you don't even hear what I said? Repeat what they said. That gains you permission. And then the other thing I think is just being present. Like my other degree, I've 2 degrees from the University of Miami. One of my degrees is in theater, and one of the things which I think makes me make a lot more sense. Mm-hmm. A little bit. Whenever I'm in front of a crowd and someone says, "What's your degree?" and I say theater, like half the crowd goes, "Oh." He is kind of crazy. That makes a lot more sense. One of the skills that you have to do in theater, especially in improv, and I used to teach improv, is being present with somebody. It is, and I think, okay, those of you who spend 28 hours a day on one of these doing this, try it. I guarantee you will pee your pants. Just sit, just the ability to sit and like be right here with someone. Not doing anything, but just to look directly into your eyes and just be present with you. And not worry about looking away and not worry about trying to assess what I see, but just to be neutral. Not off, but and not even in park where you're like, but just in neutral. Just here, and whichever way you end up rolling is gonna be fine, but just know I'm just here. Just right here. Not saying anything and not going anywhere, but not locked in, but just here. Not like, in case it is not evident, I am paying attention. Yeah, exactly right. Just to be able to like be present and to do that with people who aren't your friends and who aren't your family. Like I'm sorry, ma'am, this lady is traumatized, she's never gonna be right. I'm really sorry. But to be able to just be present with somebody, like that's hard to do. Mm-hmm. But it allows you to have the permission to not be ready with anything. Mm-hmm. Like conversation is often knowing what the next thing is you're supposed to say, as opposed to just casting your fate to the wind and just letting it see where it blows. And part of being present is about allowing yourself to listen because you don't presuppose the conversation. I have a script that I sit with in the studio. I'll get through all them questions. Mm-hmm. I know. They write way too many questions. I ain't getting through all them questions. They'll put 40 questions in the script and be like, I'm gonna get through 14 of them questions. You wasted your whole night writing questions. I love you, but you could have been done by the close of business. Because I know my job is to be present, and we're getting comments from you. So I've got a computer here that shows me curated comments. I have TweetDeck over here, but there's also a producer in the control room who's curating like the best emails and tweets and Facebook posts, or who will say, hey, Justin's comment is pertinent to what the guest just said, and I can move that up to the top of the list. But I know I'm never gonna ask all the questions I'd like to ask. Not a show goes by, not one, where I get all my questions asked. Ever. Because the best content is not in the writing, it's not in the speaking, it's in the editing. Mm-hmm. We will often take an hour-long conversation and the morning of say, there was news that we should talk about. Let's squish this down to 2 segments out of 3. And it's sharper. You don't need to say everything you're thinking. You may not be that bright. Editing yourself may be the smartest thing you do all day. It's like that saying, it's better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and relieve all doubt. Like, just give yourself a chance to enjoy the serendipity, the adventure, the unpredictability, the risk of an in-the-moment encounter with someone where you say, whatever you have to bring is fine with me. I may not like it, I may question it, but say it. If you feel it needs to be said, I'm ready to hear it. Go. Hard to do, but necessary if you want to be a good listener.
So I can testify to much of what you said here today in that last response, because I too had 25 to 30 questions to ask you.
It's rough, ain't it?
I don't know, Dr. Gibbons is probably looking, she didn't hit NAM. One of my questions that I put on the NAM one, because I was in the moment and listening. And what I also realized I haven't done is I've been hogging up the time. And I want to give the audience an opportunity, because if you don't, I have more questions. So, as I have shared with you.
Don't let her ask them all.
No, don't.
Make her edit.
There are 2 microphones, one in each aisle. I would invite you to a microphone to pose your questions succinctly, and we'll give an opportunity to Joshua to answer as many as he can, and I'll try to moderate this, and I'll go to this young man over here because I happen to know who he is.
And if you wouldn't mind, just introduce yourself, your name, where you're from, if you're with an organization, or if you're a student here, just so I have an idea of who I'm talking to.
Okay, my name's John Compton. I'm with a variety of organizations. I'm retired. I'm on the town council of Washington Grove, and I won't bore you with any more. I'm also on a board of directors here at the Pinckney Innovation Complex here on the campus as well. But one thing you implied a little bit but didn't explicitly address is that, and it's a formidable issue in our times with our current multimedia, and I mean all the sorts of media, and that is the idea of news as entertainment. That there's a tremendous amount of effort put into presenting, whether the news in an entertaining way or presenting entertainment as news, and filtering that. Let me step back. People, many of us are listening and are looking for entertainment. We're not necessarily looking for facts or good ideas, and that is a problem and a challenge to somehow get all of us to understand when we're seeing entertainment and when we're really seeing something important. I'd like you to comment.
Well, I hear you. I mean, Jim Lehrer, who used to be the longtime anchor and co-creator of the McNeil Lehrer NewsHour, what's now the PBS NewsHour. For those of you who are too young to grow up with Jim Lehrer on PBS. He had Jim Lehrer's Rules of Journalism. If you Google it, they're fantastic. The rule number 10, I think it's a list of 10. Rule number 10 is, I am not in the entertainment business. And I think that's important for us to know what our job is. Having said that, you should also go back and listen to Edward R. Murrow covered the war in Britain back in the 1940s. The oldest newscast in the country is called the CBS World News Roundup. It's the radio newscast that airs, I think it aired on WTOP. I don't know if they still air it anymore. But it's the oldest running newscast in the country. Edward R. Murrow originated that, and he did a bunch of classic reports from the rooftops in London as bombs were falling. There's a great one that begins, "This is London." And he describes what he's seeing, and you hear in the background and sirens and people running, and you hear it's rich. There's all this what we call ambient sound. He could have sat in the CBS bureau in London and said, soundproof this room, and pervade the same facts, but we would have been missing information. We would have been missing story, and it would have been boring. And it would have thereby been inaccurate, because the war was dramatic. It was happening in that way. Same thing with Bernard Shaw on the roof of the Ambassador Hotel in Baghdad as the bombs were falling. Remember that? Bombs over Baghdad? Those of us who are old enough to remember that landmark in the Persian Gulf, in the Gulf War, the first Gulf War. News is not supposed to be entertaining necessarily, but it must be compelling. John Dewey once said the media's job is to interest the public in the public interest. It is not your job to be interested. And I have this argument with my team all the time. NPR listeners are smart. They trust us to curate information. Yes, true. We are also reaching new people. I don't want to keep just the NPR audience. I want everybody. I want 1A to be the #1 radio show in the country, and I want every NPR station to be #1 in its market. And that means we can't just stick with our existing audience. It is not your job to be inherently interested. It is our job to be interesting, to call you in, because we've got the best stuff. Diane Sawyer did that first interview with Bruce Jenner when Bruce Jenner was about to transition, 2-hour special. Very flashy, salacious promotion marketing. I was like, oh Lord, what fresh hell is this finna be? It was one of the best 2-hour documentaries I ever saw. It was beautiful, brilliant. I had no edits. Often I'll watch 60 Minutes and have edits. This was one of the best 2-hour documentaries ever. But the hook felt very slick and very ABC, like 2020 Barbara Walters soft filter special. And it was great. And if there's one thing I've learned to stop doing, it's to judge other journalists for how they do their job. I don't like doing news as entertainment, but I don't work for the people they work for. I insist on being compelling, but what I consider compelling, someone else could consider prurient and thoroughly entertaining. They might just want Judy Woodruff just saying it plain to a camera. That's boring. That doesn't work for me. At the same time, I know people who will discover a story through TMZ because TMZ tends to be right, like them or not. And then as they continue digging for deeper context, then they make it to NPR. So do I disdain TMZ for bringing them into the story? No. But when they're ready for something else, I need to be there to serve them. And I do take your point, but as a journalist, I have to be careful. You as a consumer, you consume whatever you want. I don't judge what anybody else consumes. But as a journalist, I have to be careful not to judge other people's work. As long as you are in that river of information, you can find me. And if TMZ is what brings you in, or if Radar Online is what brings you in, or whatever it is that brought you in, my job is just to make sure that I can encounter you, so that when I have a chance to meet you, I can interest you, and I can bring you in for something better.
Thank you, John. Over here.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Christopher. I'm a writer for the MC Advocate newspaper, and you said you were originally.
You said you write for the newspaper?
Yeah.
Oh, yay! Yes, yay, absolutely.
The head of the newspaper.
Let me
is
add my
actually
yay
up
to
there.
yay.
I just wanted to ask you. You said you were originally a theater major. What actually influenced you to switch from theater to actually pursuing journalism as a career?
I was always interested in journalism. I was never sure that I was going to be an actor, but I always liked performance. And I always found that my interest in broadcasting from a young age, and my interest in theater and my interest in public speaking and speech and debate, they always kind of interlocked. So theater was something that I liked to do. I went to the University of Miami, and at the School of Communication, you're required to have a bachelor's in the College of Arts and Sciences to fill out your credits. So theater was what I picked. I always knew I wanted to be in broadcasting from when I was like 5. This is like the journey for my lifetime dream, this. So I always knew, and I knew what I wanted was somewhere at the intersection of like Bernard Shaw from CNN, who was I don't know how old you are, he's a long time anchor at CNN. Arsenio Hall, who was a late night talk show host, and Oprah Winfrey.
Wow.
Who is Oprah Winfrey?
Yes.
And, because if you don't know who Oprah is, I got none for you. And I knew what I wanted was somewhere in the middle, like that ability to be thoroughly credible, and when you speak, people listen and they trust what you say, and then being on kind of the cutting edge of culture and what people are talking about and be right on the zeitgeist, and then be that space where everybody showed up. Like, I never wanted a target market. I want everybody. Damn it, I'm greedy. And I wanted a space where everyone could show up, because everybody knew about Oprah. Everybody didn't watch Oprah, but like, you all kind of knew, like, if it was on Oprah, like, go, fine, we're gonna watch Oprah. Right. The president's on Oprah, we will just leave the house at 4 instead of 3. And we will sit here and watch Oprah. So I knew that was where I wanted to be, and as I studied public speaking and theater and all these other things, the skills kind of interlocked. That's why it was beneficial for me in college to study everything I was interested in. I studied philosophy, I studied African American history, I sang jazz, I sang musical theater. Like, I did everything, and improv, and it all built on itself. So when the time came for me to pick a career, all I had to do was say, what is the one thing in my life that I would most regret not doing? What do I not want to regret when I'm old and gray? And it was trying broadcasting. Even if I didn't succeed, I knew that when God calls me home, I don't want this to be the thing I said, I'm sorry, I know you gave me the capacity for this, but I didn't bother to try. And once I built the skill set, I was like, okay, broadcasting or bust.
Thank you.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Hi,
Go back over here.
you're up.
Hello, my name is Deef. I live in Rockville, Maryland.
I didn't catch your name, sir?
Deef, D-E-E.
Hi.
I live in Rockville. I work as a hospice volunteer and also a grief facilitator.
Oh.
One of my my weird passions is to try to generalize mental health and a lot of the different industry intersections of that to combine to sort of just make a lot of stuff that's overcomplicated simple. Within that framework, I've seen, just like we've talked about how a lot of the general public doesn't have the stomach capacity to digest much reality or news. It's almost like there's a preference for fantasy now. And there's some papers written about the coddling of the American mind, in addition to social media sort of shortening the attention span of the public. So some other historians, Neil Ferguson mentioned that the public doesn't have the capacity to process long-form books or even articles. And if the masses are sort of in this, they can't really take much reality. So what can we do towards that? Or is this something that we have to just build more skills to be more compelling to try to draw their attention? When we're fighting big data that's actively trying to...
I would agree about attention spans, about people not having the attention span, if the #1 audiobooks on Amazon were not still Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And I would agree if the #1 telecasts every year were not the Oscars and the Super Bowl. People have the attention span for something they want. And I would agree with that if the #1 network on cable was not, at times, the Fox News channel. Say what you want about Fox News. They have found a way to keep people watching for very long stretches of time. So I question the premise, but I understand where it comes from. I think social media does present a challenge to attention span, no doubt about it. But think about how long we spend on social media. So it's not that we don't have an attention span. It's not that we've lost our attention span for news. It's that we have gained an attention span for Facebook. You see what I'm saying? It's just a matter of how you slice it and dice it. We just used to take a sip of Walter Cronkite and a sip of the Wall Street Journal and a sip of WAMU, and now we are drowning in Facebook. We are immersed all day long. And it follows us around. It follows me. I can flip on a web page and then go to Facebook, and it's like, I saw you looking at that web page, Joshua. I thought you might be interested in this project on Amazon. I'm like, get out of my head! So it knows you.
It does.
And I think part of the problem with some journalists, not all, and I'm not calling names, and I'm not trying to cast aspersions, but I wonder if part of the problem is not that people have lost their attention span, they just may not be interested in what you're writing. Maybe your writing needs to grow. Maybe your skills need to change. You don't judge your audience. Like, your audience is trying to tell you something. Not interested. Thanks. Not feeling it. I'd rather go play Angry Birds. Like, okay, fine. Go play Angry Birds, but when you're done, in those moments that you have, how can I hook you? There's an exercise I used to do with students about how to pitch a story. Imagine that you've just come back from the story of your career. Excellent piece. And you're coming back to our offices. Our newsroom's up on the 20th floor. You run into the lobby and you see someone who's in the elevator. And you go, stop, 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 hold the elevator. And you come skidding into the elevator and you say, thank you so much. Oh my God. 20th floor, please. And the guy's like, well, you look like hell. Where have you been? Oh my God, most amazing story of my entire career. Oh my God, I've been waiting to do this story my whole life. I'm so excited. I can't wait to put this together. Okay, what was it? How would you tell the story before you both got off on the 20th floor and went your separate ways well enough so that he would want to tell someone else? Now imagine you're still going to the 20th floor, but he's getting off on the 10th floor. What would you omit from the first version of your story to make it equally clear, doubly concise, and just as compelling? Now imagine he's getting off on 5. Imagine he's walking the stairs to the 2nd floor. He's not even going to the elevator. What would you say to call him over? We have to be able to do every version of that story. The 20th floor story, that's the hour of 1A, or the segment, or however long the piece is. 10th floor, that's the billboard, the 60-second intro at the top where the theme music plays, that's called a billboard. The 5th floor version, there's your promo. 22 seconds of copy and 7 seconds of music. How do I summarize an hour-long show in 22 seconds? We do it every single day. And that thing where we call him over from the stairs, that's a tweet that gets you to listen. That's a Facebook post that gets you to engage. I can't judge you. I have to accept you where you are. And if I have you in a short attention span space, I got to have the skill to say, hey, you're missing out. And here's what it is. I got to be able to put it right at the top and not judge the audience. Because once you accept them where they are, you give them a little. If it's good, they'll be like, what else? give me a little more. And you give them that, and if you finish it well, if you create a good enough tease to the next part, they'll be like, I had a Star Wars Battlefront 2 marathon coming on my PlayStation, but I'm gonna, 10 more minutes. You see what I'm saying? You have to be strategic. What are you gonna say to me first to hook me? Let me give you my haiku for all great content. Ready? Yeah. Hook me right away. Use the fewest words you can. Less is always more. Hook me right away. Use the fewest words you can. Less is always more. One of the strongest hooks we ever did on 1A, the show began before there was Trayvon Martin, there was Emmett Till. Gotcha. It was a book by Timothy Tyson, revisiting the Emmett Till murder. The woman who claimed Emmett Till whistled at her confessed that she lied, and he got the interview. That set up the whole show. After that, it was easy. Beginnings are hard. I think part of the problem with attention span is we don't know where to begin with people on Facebook. What do you say first to someone who just encounters you in this river? What do you show them? In the split second, they get to see your work. That's the hard part. Not the attention span. It's the acumen. It's the expertise. It's not your job to be interested. It's our job to be interesting.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hello. My name is Mohib Durrani, and I'm also the advisor to the Muslim Students Association here. Thank you, Dr. Pollard, for inviting a very prestigious individual here.
Awesome.
And at the same time, emphasizing on social justice and radical inclusion. When we have very qualified people, we tend to ask some tough questions. So, at least for me, what has NPR been doing and focusing on and will continue to do to inform us Americans about the social injustice and the radical exclusion of the Palestinian people?
Social injustice and radical exclusion. Well, the Palestinian conflict is an interesting one. First of all, I should contextualize. I work for American University, which owns WAMU. I don't work for NPR. I've never worked for the network directly. I've only ever worked for stations. I know it all sounds kind of seamless, but just by way of clarification. So I can't speak from inside the company because I've never worked for the company. But to your question, I feel like that particular story is one of the very hardest to cover under any circumstances because the feelings are so strong. And no matter what you say, and no matter what side of a story that you cover, you're always going to get flack. You're never going to have people say, you called it right down the middle. It's, and I don't quarrel with the audience for it, like I get it. It's one of those stories that is so tough to do well. I think part of the challenge is also in the language we use. You mentioned the social injustice and the radical exclusion of the Palestinian people. I think that's the challenge for someone like me is to see the perspective within that. And there's no judgment baked into this, but depending on your view of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or just the Arab world in general, what some would consider exclusion, others would consider reasonable protection, right? It's kind of a matter of your view. So for me, the challenge when we do coverage of particularly the Palestinian people is to make sure we reflect those views and keep them in context. So if you, for example, feel that there's a radical exclusion going on, that you know you've been heard, right? That I ask you questions that allow you to say your piece and then try to recreate them back. Okay, I got it. So what you're saying is, and usually with my job I can't use the exact same words because time's tight, so I have to find a way to compress them, but to kind of say it back to you in a way that makes you know, I got it. And then you say, yes, that's how I feel. Okay, cool. Sit tight. Let me hear from you on your view of this. Where do you come down? And then let them do the same thing. Now, my job makes it easier, because we're a talk show. And so, you know, we're going to have a guest who believes this thing, and then a guest who believes that thing, and we're all going to talk. So you know you're going to hear contrasting points of view. And if you stick it out long enough, you'll hear them both. And we'll give them room to, you know, to debate. And even if it gets spicy, that's cool. That's what this forum is for. But I think our job on NPR, depending on the story, is to first of all accept that feelings are strong all the way around. And there's no way we're going to make everyone go, that was perfect. That was exactly what we needed to hear. Because people have so much invested in it, rightly so, understandably so. And then depending on what you're hearing on NPR, to manage that expectation shrewdly. Like if it's a newscast story and it's super quick, maybe we just stick very much to the facts. This side says this thing, this side says this thing. Here's what's happening, here's where it's gonna go. Daniel Estrin, NPR News, Jerusalem. Boop, and that's the end of it. It's a longer, because that's the best you can do in 40 seconds. If it's a longer piece, get into a little more context, be very, very clear about what the story's about and what the context is, and keep it as equitable as possible. And then in a program like 1A, we have more room to kind of stretch, but I'm not an expert on the conflict, so I have to make sure not to get ahead of my skis and have guests who come down with expertise. But even experts have perspectives, right? So you'll have an expert who views Palestinians one way, and then another expert, a legitimate expert, who views it a completely different way. So we also have dueling experts. It's incredibly complicated, but that's what we're built for. Like we can handle it. We just have to be mindful that we're never gonna make everybody happy. We got to try to inform, especially those people who don't have a strong dog in the fight, so they at least can hear the people who do and understand why, for example, someone comes at it with a particular view. Passion, anger, irritation, fear, hope, whatever, and the information. That is all part of the conversation, and that we don't judge people for feeling as they feel. I think that's, in many cases, and it may not be terribly satisfying, but in many cases, that's often the best we can do with that particular story.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Diane Dunlap, and I teach a class here. In fact, my students, would you raise your hands over there?
All right.
I was hoping
That's
one of them.
A+s all around.
I was hoping one of them would stand up, but anyway.
Oh, they didn't? We wanted them to stand up?
Well.
B-, never mind.
Anyway, I think they're going to find that this is a perfect ending to our unit on fake news. We've been studying fake news and media bias, and for some of them, my students are 17 students from 14 different countries. And some of them are, for them, the idea of media bias is a new concept. Some of them come from places where there was only one opinion that was projected or available to them. Anyway, my question for you is, one of the things we have done is look at some of the some opinions on where the various news media stand in terms of left and right. And based on what you have said, I know you try to be objective and not lean in either direction. NPR on most of the charts that we have examined comes left center. Do you think that's correct? And secondly, do you think those labels are useful?
I think the labels can be useful. Yeah, I mean, Fox News leans right. I think that's fine as long as you know what you're getting. I just wish they would just come out of that particular closet and just own it. But I don't work for Fox News and I'm not an exec, so they can do whatever they want. But I think the labels are fine as long as you know what you're getting. MSNBC leans to the left. CNN just likes to have everybody in the room and have them all yelling and screaming. I don't know what CNN is. But I think they can be useful, yeah. In terms of where NPR falls, I think center-left is reasonable. We know our audience, certainly the loudest among them, lean left, but we have lots of conservatives in the audience who love NPR and really don't like Fox News. And we have plenty of conservatives in our audience who would make a point early on in 1A's life to say how welcome they felt on our show, how much they felt that the conservative guests we had were respected, and they weren't just there to be punching bags. We're like, well, how would we invite somebody on the show for me to beat them up? I don't need to beat, have you seen these biceps? I'm not gonna hit somebody. But they wanted to affirm that we were there and that they saw us and that they appreciated it. Mm-hmm. So I think if the labels can be useful in that way, for example, for people to say, oh, this is who usually caters to me, and this is this thing I didn't expect. I didn't know I belonged there. It's kind of a shock for people sometimes. I think NPR prefers to think of itself as very much down the center. We try really, really hard to do that. And then to an extent also, you gotta let people's perceptions be what they are. Like, it's that old saying, it ain't what they call you, it's what you answer to. And people call us everything but a child of God, quite frankly. And it's okay. Like, if people want to say, oh, that leftist waste of government, taxpayer dollars, Congress, fine. Whatever helps you sleep. I got work to do. I have an audience who already trusts me and already appreciates what we do that I could be serving rather than worrying about you trying to label me and box me in, or pigeonhole me. Say what you want. I have work to do.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Johnson and
Hi.
Dr. Pollard. Thank you so much for coming to speak at our school. My name is Rashad Seibert. I am a student senator at large at Tacoma Park campus. I came by today to listen to you. I listened to your show. I maybe even called in a couple of times. So,
Okay.
Yes.
Well, keep
yes.
calling.
I sure will. Yes. So my question, just get straight to the point. Let's see, social media, young people, we use social media. It's like our source of news that has been the word around town. So how can we focus the news that's coming at us? You know, because I know they use these algorithms that kind of like, you know, make your internet experience tailored to you. So how can we, or what would you suggest to focus the news that's coming at us to what we need, you know what I mean? And also this engaging space, like the example you used, how do you think that could be achieved online?
I just want to make sure I understand your question. You mean focus the news you receive through social media?
Yes, you know, how we'll get ads or just something, you know, that we might be interested in. It knows we're interested in this.
Right.
You know, so, yeah.
Well, to an extent, you can't. The algorithms are not designed to keep you smart. They're designed to keep you still. They're designed to keep you here, right? They're for your thumbs, not your brain. So to an extent, you just have to understand that Facebook is not in it necessarily for your edification. I think they're getting better at it. There are plenty of people at Facebook who are thoroughly, thoroughly concerned about the quality of content on Facebook. We've had some on the show. I believe they're sincere. Journalists who went to work, like honest-to-God journalists, who went to work for Facebook, who understand journalism, but they ain't in this for you. They have shareholders to deal with. So I think the biggest thing you can do is be mindful of what game they're playing. and just make that make sense for yourself. We did one of the other things that we talked about, and I say this not to bash Facebook, but to make sure that you manage your expectations. Like when I was teaching at Cal, when we were talking about marketing, we talked about what companies really sell. And I asked them, what does Disneyland sell? They said, well, vacations. No, they don't sell vacation. What do they actually sell? If you asked a Disneyland executive, what do you sell? What would she say? And they kind of went all the way around, and finally, we got to it. If you ask a Disneyland executive, they would say they sell magical memories. Magical memories. What does Harley Davidson sell? Motorcycles. I'm like, shut up. You heard the first question, fool. Shut up. What do they actually sell? A Harley executive once said, what we sell is the ability of a 45-year-old accountant to wear black leather, drive through small towns, and have people be afraid of him. Harley Davidson sells an American sense of rebellion. They're in the rebellion business. Motorcycles are just a delivery device. And then I asked them, what does CBS sell? Television? Advertising? No. What do they sell? Well, how much does it cost to watch CBS? Well, nothing. CBS is free. Exactly. So what are they really selling? How does CBS make its money? Advertising. And what does it need for the ads to work? It needs me to watch? Yeah, so what is CBS actually selling? Audiences. You are the product. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. CBS does a great variety of 60 Minutes is on CBS. So it's not like they're evil. But depending on what you think of 60 Minutes. But you got to know what business they're really in, right? So I can't be mad at CBS for putting on what they put on, because I know what business they're in, right? If I don't like what they're doing, I just need to be mindful. And whether it's CBS or TBS or PBS, you just have to be aware. Facebook, you got to know what business they're in. Same as CBS. You are their product. So to both of your questions about being shrewd about what you get on Facebook and about the ability to create community, you have to be mindful of what this channel is in it for, right? NPR's job is to help create community. The stated mission of NPR is to work in partnership with member stations to create a more informed public, one that is challenged and invigorated by a deeper understanding and appreciation of events, ideas, and cultures. That's the mission of NPR, to work in partnership with member stations to create a more informed public. So, stations are part of the equation, right? They're baked into this. Twitter's mission is very different. Facebook's mission is very different. So you might be able to use those as tools, but keep them in their perspective. Like, they're not just here for you. If you can be helped by them, that's great, but they have other masters to serve. So as long as you keep it in context, as long as you manage that expectation, it's cool. But don't be mad if it's not easy or if they won't facilitate it. You just have to be shrewd about what they're really about. Use the tools as best you can. If they're not making your life easier, hey, maybe I just need to tweak my user experience. Maybe I need to follow people of different political backgrounds. Follow some news outlets I don't usually follow, because those news outlets will retweet people that I don't usually follow, and diversify intentionally. But at a certain point, just make sure you know what game they're really in and then manage that expectation.
Thank you. Our last question goes to one of our outstanding faculty members here at the college. And just so you know, I'm supposed to be managing time, so I see people telling me I've got 4 minutes. So 4 minutes for question and response.
I'm going to give you a one-sentence answer.
No.
Oh, no. Thank you so much, Dr. Pollard, for inviting Joshua Johnson. Thank you. Welcome for coming here. We really appreciate you. This has been a truly enjoyable night. I just want to tell you, I am a faculty member here. I'm in broadcast media production, so I teach the audio radio classes here at Montgomery College.
Excellent.
Thank you. Yes, my question for you, though, is this. Now, a lot of people have had questions about new media, and you were talking about earlier the a flow of information, like there's a river of information. There's so much information out there. And even for the media professional, there's still a lot of information there. So being a media professional, you have so many other options that you can involve yourself in. You're not only a radio show host, but you also can go on YouTube. You could have your own YouTube channel. You could have your own blog. You can do a podcast. I mean, there's so many options. So I really wanted to ask you, how have you personally decided to integrate or successfully integrate this new media spectrum into your life? And do you think that it has benefited you in terms of what your major goal is as a radio broadcaster?
It's benefited me for sure. I mean, we make very solid use of social media. Our social media guru, Gabe Bullard, is fantastic. So, we burn up Facebook and Twitter, and we experimented with Instagram and Snapchat, and we kind of have found that Facebook and Twitter are the most useful to us on a regular basis. Nothing against Instagram or Snapchat. They do different things that don't really serve us as well for engagement or for conversation. So we've kind of let those go for the most part. We do stream video. The Friday News Roundup is always video streamed both hours. When we hit the road, we try to stream it as well. We're getting better at that. So we use them to kind of build the presence out. There are a couple things though for me. One is I have to remember that I can't be a different person on Twitter, right? I can't be a jackass on Twitter and then come be on the radio and be Joshua Johnson, the friendly and trusted radio host. I can't do that because let me tell you something about today's young people. Other than the fact that you are phenomenal, you are walking, talking BSO-meters. Yes. Like it doesn't, it's the aroma. It's too much. And audiences will sniff you out like that. Mm-hmm. So if you are, half-stepping in what you claim to be, you won't last long. So I find that I have to use social media less because I edit myself very shrewdly. Mm-hmm. How is someone gonna take this, right? And I don't need to post all the time. 1A posts frequently. We post stories, for example, that we don't use on the air, just to kind of see if people react. And then if people, this is kind of interesting, post it to Facebook. And then depending on the comments we get, we might go, that elicited a response. We want to see where that goes. But for me, I have to be very shrewd about how I use social media and sometimes just tweet something or write a tweet and then delete it. Oh, pro tip, TweetDeck is my favorite Twitter app. Because there's a function you can put on, it's a little checkbox that says ready to send. And if you change a character in the tweet, that checkbox goes out and it won't let you tweet it out until you click ready to send. It's a little editorial checkpoint that gives your brain a minute to say, don't tweet that, that'll get you 5 to 10. It gives you a moment to stop. And I made sure that feature is on. You worked too hard to get here, brother, don't tweet it. The other thing for me is that I don't want to put too much energy in social media because I worked so hard to get to NPR. Mm-hmm. The nation built NPR for me. When it launched in 1971, when those 90 stations, including WAMU, which is a founding member of National Public Radio, put that together, they knew the nation needed a better place to talk about what's going on. This is a public trust. Like, I got hooked on NPR as a 13-year-old. Mm-hmm. My mother was listening to WRTI in Philadelphia, which was a news and jazz station.
I worked there.
Oh, okay, so you know RTI, all right.
As a host.
Okay, so back decades ago when they aired Morning Edition and All Things Considered, there used to be two.
Okay, I was there after then.
Right,
after
so
that point, yeah.
My mother heard the jazz and then she ended up hearing Robert Siegel on All Things Considered. And she got hooked and she hooked me. And at the time, I didn't know there was no one who looked like me on NPR. I just knew I liked it. And over time, I started to think, they're never gonna take me. I don't have the right energy, I'm too different, I'm too loud, I'm too aggressive. Like I don't sound like anything on NPR and I don't wanna do bah, 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 bah. Like that's just not my style. I can't. And I knew that I just lost faith. And then when 1A came around, it restored my faith, because getting hired will do that to you.
Mm-hmm. And keeping a job will help.
And keeping a job will keep your faith strong. But this was built for me. And so I have to remember the power of this megaphone. I can either I can engage in social media, which is very important, but I can't neglect the fact that we reach 3 million people a week on 1A, on 274 stations and growing, because what we have was not just designed for you, the person. It was designed for we, the people.
The democracy.
And we need institutions that are built for we, the people. I totally respect media creators who are like, I'm not going through the corporate system, I'm tired of waiting, I'm doing my own thing. I get that. But some of us, as we are called, as we are led, as we are motivated, need to pound down those doors and say, we, the people, need a place to talk. We, the people, need to be heard. We, the people, need to show our neighbors that we still care. We, the people, need a place to go when we can't go home for the holidays. We, the people, built this. This still belongs to everybody. And I deserve to be at that table. I busted my ass. I studied hard. I'm ready. I'm prepped. I'm not just talented. I am thoroughly skilled. Let me in. And that was what I decided to do. So for me, it's been about learning to use these media in a useful way, but remembering at all times that we still includes me.
On that note, I believe you will understand why I was immediately captivated by Joshua Johnson when I had the opportunity to meet him over a year ago when he moved to this area. And this conversation tonight has just reconnected me. I found myself listening deeply, thinking deeply about what your words and inspirations mean for me in the work that I choose to do, and most importantly, what this work Montgomery College does. So I want to thank you for being our guest tonight. This was actually our final presidential dialogue for the year, and I see some familiar faces who've been at several of these last year and then this year. I'm hopeful that we will see you again in the future. Our intent is to have these back in the fall with another panel of phenomenal speakers. And in the fall, I'm on sabbatical, but I'm actually going to come back and facilitate these because I think it is just powerful. And I learn. It's like my intellectual candy as a college president. Thank you for being a part of this. I'm honored to live in a community and work at a college that does this work. Let me give a shout out to our MCTV people. I did not do a good job. I did not do a good job at managing time. I'll do better next time, but he got me. I was hooked. I was listening. I want to thank our special events team for the work that they do in making sure things happen, our Germantown campus for hosting this, and the incomparable Dr. Gibbons for always making sure that I have plenty of questions that I never get to. Thank you all. Safe travels and have a good night.